I walked out on my dying father. He never woke up again. I walked out on my father on Christmas night. I thought I could come back in the morning. I need to tell you how it happened. Not because I want you to understand me, but because I need you to understand how easy it is, how normal it feels in the moment, how you can destroy something irreplaceable and not even realize you're doing it until it's already done. My father had been sick for 14 months, lung cancer, stage 3. He was getting weaker, but he was still him. Still sharp, still called me every Sunday, still had opinions about everything and wasn't shy about sharing them. I drove up Christmas Eve. 6 hours, bad traffic, arrived late. He was already in his chair by the time I got there, thinner than the last time, but dressed nicely, like he'd made an effort. There was food on the table. He'd asked his neighbor to help him cook. I didn't notice any of that until later. Christmas Day was fine, quiet. We watched a game, ate leftovers, talked about small things. He seemed tired but happy. I remember thinking we had time. That evening, I don't even remember how it started. Something small, the way it always is. Something about money, about a decision I'd made years ago that he'd disagreed with, something that should have been a 10-second conversation. But we were tired, and we were scared, both of us, in ways we hadn't said out loud. And sometimes fear comes out sideways. He said something. I said something back. Voices got sharper. And then I said something I won't repeat. Something that had been sitting in me for years. Something that was not meant for a sick man in a chair on Christmas night. He went very quiet. Not angry quiet, just quiet. And I grabbed my coat. He didn't say anything. I said, "I need some air, I'll be back." I drove to a hotel 20 minutes away. Told myself I'd go back in the morning when we'd both calm down. Told myself there was time. I didn't go back the next morning. I told myself he needed rest, that we'd talk later. I drove home the day after Christmas. 6 hours. I thought about calling the whole way. I didn't. The hospital called on the 28th. His neighbor had found him that morning, collapsed in the kitchen, barely conscious. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was unresponsive. I was in my car before I finished the call. 3 hours of driving. Every mile the same thought. Just be awake. Just be awake when I get there. Just give me 5 minutes. Just let me say what I should have said on Christmas night before I grabbed my coat and walked out on a dying man because I was too proud to let something go. Just give me 5 minutes. He was alive when I got there. That's the thing people don't tell you. Alive covers so much ground. He was in the bed, breathing. The machines were steady, but his eyes were closed and they stayed closed. I sat next to him and held his hand. I don't know if he could hear me. I chose to believe he could. I told him I was sorry. I told him he was right. About the money, about the decision, about all of it. That it didn't matter. That it had never mattered. I told him I loved him. I said it 3 times because I couldn't remember the last time I'd said it out loud, and I wanted to make sure it counted. He didn't squeeze my hand. He didn't open his eyes. He just breathed, slow and steady, while I sat in the plastic chair with the Christmas decorations still up in the hallway outside and understood, really understood, for the first time, what too late actually feels like from the inside. He held on for 11 days. I stayed for all of them. Because I wasn't leaving again. I talked to him every day, told him about small things, the things he used to ask about on Sunday calls that I always answered too quickly. I don't know how much he heard. I hope some of it. He died on a Tuesday morning in January, quietly. I was holding his hand. I've spent a long time trying to figure out what to do with what I know now. There's no clean lesson, no simple takeaway. I walked out on my dying father because I was angry and proud, and I told myself there was time, and there wasn't. And I have to live with that. But here's what I keep coming back to. He didn't stop me when I walked out. For a long time I thought that meant he was angry too, that he was letting me go. But I think differently now. I think he didn't stop me because he loved me. because he knew I was scared and grieving in advance, grieving him while he was still there, which is its own kind of unbearable. And he thought I'd come back the next morning and we'd sit at the kitchen table and drink bad coffee and be okay again, the way we always got okay again. He just didn't have the next morning. Neither did I. If you're angry at your parent right now, if there's something sitting between you that keeps getting postponed because there's always more time, don't leave. Not tonight. Not like that. I know how righteous it feels to grab your coat. I know how easy it is to think I'll deal with this later. Later is not promised. Sit back down. Say the real thing, not the sharp thing. Or don't say anything at all. Just stay. Because the moment you most want to leave, that might be the moment they need you most to be there. There's a photo on my phone from Christmas Day, before the argument. We're at the table, him in his chair, dressed nicely, the food his neighbor helped him make spread out between us. He's looking at the camera. He's smiling. He got dressed and set the table and cooked a meal because his son was coming home for Christmas. That's all he wanted. His son. Home. For Christmas. I almost missed what that was. I almost missed who he was. I'm glad I have the photo. I just wish I'd looked at him that way when I was still in the room. Stay. Even when everything in you wants to leave. You can be angry and still stay. You can be hurt and still stay. You can be everything you are and still choose not to walk out that door. Because one day that door will close for the last time, and you'll want to know you were on the right side of that door